Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at LCDC Incorporated Presents. And today's guest is John Kolwaite from the Hagashi School and other places. And he's going to help us today discussing aspects of autism. And as usual, my friend and associate, Dr. Stephen Shore, is with us. And thank you both for coming today, John and Stephen.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great to be here. Ready to rock
All
and
right.
roll.
Stephen and I were talking briefly before about assessment. Population we're talking about with autism, youngsters with some significant challenges. And we're wondering, when you're talking about meeting a new kid, what are the things that you're looking for? You've heard from the parents, this child has problems communicating, being around other people. How would they set it up at Hagashi?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. So when I worked there for just under 30 years, and I'm still associated as an educational consultant with Boston Nagashi School, and I go in there once a week and do fun projects. But and it was all fun all the years there. Obviously, very challenging as well. But one of the things that I got involved with a lot when I was a director at the Boston Nagashi School was what we called the admissions committee, and we would have similar to what you mentioned. We would have a child that had applied to the school, and they'd already been diagnosed by a clinician that to be on the autism spectrum. But as we all know, when you meet one person on the autism spectrum, you've met one person on the autism spectrum. It's
Yeah.
whatever you think you know tends to be thrown out the window. And so you have to really have a clear head and look at things with a fresh eye. And we would do it very, I guess, maybe experientially. So one way the typical way we do it, we still do it this way, is when the student applies to the school, we've received all their paperwork. So we get a basic idea, of their history, diagnosis, some of the presentation. But then again, those are words on paper. And when you meet a live human being, it tends to be a very different experience. And typically the testimony that you've received from the packet is from the parents' point of view. And we all know parents and their children tend to have, the most tight relationship. That probably the tightest one the bond you have with your parents is probably the strongest one you make in your life. But that being said, parents aren't trained experts. They're not trained teachers. They're oftentimes the presentation that their child has with them is different than they may have with other situations. So the first thing we do in admissions is we invite the parents and the child to the school. And the parents go in a room and talk with clinicians, and the child goes around the school with a director, typically myself or one of the other directors. And we go with an OT, uh, occupational therapist, a physical therapist, a speech and
Right.
language pathologist, and maybe the master teacher of the division where that child might be placed. We form a group and we bring the child around the school. Now it's a little intimidating. The child comes in, bye, mom and dad. I'm in a place I've never been with people I don't know, and I'm going to separate from you and go with them. So that
Mhm.
little threshold is always interesting. One of my favorite experiences with that was a young boy came in probably about 5 years old, and he uh he um he was in the lobby waiting for this entourage to approach, and he apparently the fish tank was in the lobby, and the fish tank was making bubbles and watery sounds. So him, that was the signal time for swimming or bathing perhaps because he got completely naked.
Oh.
So when the
Okay.
group walked into the lobby to bring this child on a tour of the school, there we saw all of them right there. And oh my gosh. But that was an interesting day because we immediately went right into, we've told the parents, listen, you can stay with us. The child's naked. Um, do you mind if we try to assist? You know, they're trying to put his clothes on him and he was being very resistant. I said, do you mind
Right.
if we intervene and try one of our techniques? And they said, yeah, do anything. It's obviously an exasperating moment. So we ended up getting, he said, you know, we found out that we knew he likes, you know, bicycles and scooters. So we brought out a scooter and and he didn't like it. We brought out uh, it's like a disc with four little wheels on it. Something you'd push, you know, speakers around in a stage or something.
Right.
He got like a fancy little dolly. So we put him on the dolly naked. And we pushed him around the big table. And this is a little remind me a little bit of Miller Method
Yeah.
in my own very, very uneducated way. We created a system. We pushed him around the table. When he got around one lap, we said, put your socks on. He did. The second lap, we put his underwear on. The third, by the time five laps, six laps, he's completely dressed. And
Wow.
he got up and he went with us. And we built a lot of trust with the parents in that experience
No doubt.
and with the child. And then he came with us and we realized, okay, well, if we go around water sounds like the bubblers at the bathrooms, hold his hand and make sure this doesn't happen again. But that particular style of having the children just come with us was very beneficial because we had a set pattern where we would always go to assess. We'd bring them to the gym and play with, you know, gym equipment and balls and stuff and see how we did in a large space. And a lot of children are intimidated with a large space and sometimes
Mm.
haven't been into large space. It is intimidating. The echoes, the sounds, there's this vast unknown. Um, and then we would bring him to places in the building where, you know, his activities would be the music room, let them hit a drum or play on an instrument. The art room, we'd have crayons and paints and things ready for them to interact with. And through that process, we kind of get to know what they like and dislike or tendencies and patterns. We'd always ask the parents what their toileting routine was and how they would sign or let us indicate that that was a need. And oftentimes they hadn't built up a system yet to indicate that, so that would create a challenge. And then would come the biggest challenge where we would bring the child to a classroom full of students because in the Higashi method under day life therapy, it's primarily group education. So
Mm.
that's another big hurdle. Like, how do you go into a room full of, you know, seven or eight students that are similar to yourself, and how do the child react to that? And so then we learned a lot. Would they gravitate towards or away? A lot of times they would withdraw. Sometimes they'd be very friendly. You didn't know.
Quick question, John, because
Mhm.
this is fascinating, and I'm noticing some similarities between Miller Method and what you're describing as we go along, and I'm going to get to that. But I was wondering, is the kid in a classroom by his first day? Is that part of the, because that's an awful lot of stuff, a new input, a new sensory. So is that the case? Joining a classroom on the
That's the
first day?
goal. That's the
Yeah,
goal. It's not always the case. Through this assessment process, we then set up a system for it when they become a student and when they become a, you know, initial stage guidance. And through this process, we determine how that's going to go.
got
Um,
it.
if they seem to gravitate without too much confusion or distress to those activities, then yeah, we'll just say welcome to Higashi on the first day, and here's your classroom.
Well,
But we had one student who came in, and he's a very funny guy. He never came. We call this an intake interview. This assessment,
right.
and we write up. We do a little write up, and so we have our own impression. At the end, we meet with the parents. The student. We all go back to the room, and we meet with the parents. And we have a little discussion, and try to see obviously if he's appropriate for the school,
Mm.
appropriately diagnosed, and that you know, we feel that it'd be a good match. But then from that, we learn a lot. One of our great friends, he came to the school and he never made it in. He jumped in the bush in front of the school and never got out. But we still admitted him. Then, the first day of school when he was coming, we knew, okay, this guy's going to jump in the bush as soon as he gets here, and he did.
Yeah.
It took us about, geez, 3 hours maybe to convince him that he should come into school, and that was very, very luckily juxtaposed to lunchtime. So when your body rhythm is like, it's time to eat, maybe I'll finally come into school and find some food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good
Um,
incentive. It's a good incentive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we knew he would be he was very, very shy. And then, so that particular student, we paired him right up with an experienced teacher in a kind of a one-on-one situation, but he was still in the group, just outside the door or
Yeah.
just inside the door, and try to create that comfort with the one teacher first, and then
That
little by little.
that sounds like a more potentially typical situation that you have that one-on-one time before entering the group. Is that the case?
Yeah, ideally that is done when ideally the classroom teacher who's going to have that student in their class um, becomes part of that process because they're the
Right.
main link. They're going to be the main person with that child throughout, the year. So the other teachers that are in the division or directors will ideally, support the class and have the classroom teacher create that bonding time. And I've seen it take as long as it can take a week or 2 or 3 weeks. I know the teachers one-on-one and bringing the student into the class, being very playful, trying to assure the student that they're a fun, trusting person that the child wants to be with, and there's a natural motivation to further that relationship. I worked a lot with the younger students, so a lot of that you're training the classroom teacher to basically be um, more sensorially attractive than the other things in the room.
Ah,
Oh, you're making noises. You're doing stuff to say like, hey, hey, I'm the
look
main event.
over, look over here.
Yeah,
Look,
and
yeah.
that was really fun. Coming up with a lot of those type of things. And
Hmm.
then once the child feels comfortable with that classroom teacher, bringing them in the context of the group, they still may stay very close proximity to that classroom teacher. I knew a young lady, she was very challenging, had a lot of self-abuse when she was when she was overwhelmed or feeling anxious. And I remember she basically hugged her teacher around the waist, and the teacher taught the whole class with this child, around her
Protection.
waist.
Yeah.
And little by little, the teacher could have the student sit in a chair and then back to the waist. And it was very gradual. I mean, it was 3, 6 months till eventually the child felt comfortable enough to not have to do that.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
But some kids jump right in. They're like, hey, this, I love this. This seems like it's made for me. And they just, boom, here we go.
I wanted to ask, um, can you recall typical or not typical, but a situation where the new kid immediately enjoys or is comfortable around the other students? Because that seems to me that would be another hurdle that
That is definitely another hurdle. One of it is the other students have, tendencies that may be a sensory challenge for that new student, the noise
right,
or just having many bodies in the same space. Um, but I've seen the other side where a child came in very friendly and went up to hi, who are you? What's your name? My name is so and so. And that can also be a challenge because the students in the class aren't used to that.
aren't comfortable with that at all.
They start to deregulate because the student is friendly and not like my usual peers. So you could see, both sides. So the key is that all the professionals in that milieu are communicating very clearly on a daily basis of what they're seeing, what the next step might be, making sure the steps are very, very small,
Mhm.
achievable. So the student is feeling confident and comfortable. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, it's always good to see a process in place, and especially on these intakes. And I can see, you guys have a lot of um, uh, experience with the seat of your pants kind of problem solving. I immediately, when you talked about the kid losing his clothes, and I thought, well, a Miller method approach might be to bring a bucket of water and have him place the hand in the water and start flapping the water a little bit to see uh, and then maybe put a sock on or something like that, or put a shirt on. But so it was a very what you guys did with it, rolling the kid around sounded very familiar. Um, but uh, what I was wondering, and Stephen, please chime in here. When you see a kid like that, um, I guess the danger is to make pre-conclusions. When you see this and see that, have there been any things that turned out to be not the case? Like since you've obviously been doing this for years and years, you make a certain judgment, and then you say like, "Whoa, it wasn't quite what I thought." And how do you react to that? I mean, these are tough kids.
Yeah, that probably happens quite often,
Yeah.
because the way they might present in that particular situation will be different. For instance, many children have been told, listen, go off with these teachers, and when you come back, we'll go right to McDonald's.
Okay.
And so then they're fine with that 1 hour challenge because they know there's a the golden arches are at the end. When they come to the school and there's no golden arches at the end of an hour, they may deregulate in a way that we were not
On
expecting.
his eyes, yeah.
So it's very important to talk to the parents very thoroughly what they've done and what the children have experienced in the previous setting and in the home, because it's if we immediately start, implementing our methodology, it can be such a shock, and it's kind of unfair to the students. So we may do what this they used to do or they previously did to make it a slow transition. For instance, some we don't use what's a good word for it? Stim toys or things. Students might have, some rattle
Figure,
or
yeah,
rubber band that they're used to using to help them regulate. And that's not something we use at Higashi School. But if you just say, hey, that thing's done, come on in, that can be too rough of a transition. We may let them have that for a little while.
got it. Yeah.
But in other ways, we've done the opposite. There's one particular case which talking with the parents is so important because these transitions or these assessments, um, it's huge adjustment. Sometimes it's a bigger adjustment for a parent than it is for the child. And we had one young man who grew up in a snowy part of the world. He fell down and broke his hip as a teenager, and he was physically fixed and all set to go. And during this process, he had to be in a wheelchair. He was physically fine to walk, run, and participate in whatever we wanted him to do, but he created an attachment to this wheelchair. He had a lot of
Hmm.
fear getting out of it. So we worked with the parents and we said, this is what we'd like to do. Sometimes the threshold or the new environment can sometimes be an asset to
Hmm.
say, this is how we do things here. And maybe that first 10, 15 minutes is a shock, but then they tend to acclimate quicker than we expect. One
Expect.
time, so we told the parents we'd like this boy to come, this young man to come in his wheelchair, but when he gets to the door, the wheelchair is going to go back in your car.
Hmm.
We'll provide two people to make sure he doesn't fall and hurt himself, but we're going to make it very clear that's the end of this. And they said he's going to be nervous, but they were more nervous.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Because we ran into that with, some of our coaching, Stephen and I, that the parental bias is there. It's the parents that can actually hold them back in situations, especially in those transition situations where you're trying to teach something.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, I'd like you to chime in a bit on any and all of what John's been
Yeah,
talking about.
well, it's a very interesting discussion here, and I'm seeing parallels between the Miller method and daily life therapy,
Yeah.
and that being um, making the teacher, therapist, who's ever supporting the child, the central person, and meeting the person where they are, and establishing that initial bond, where it might be you have a child who's fascinated with frogs, so we use frogs.
Mm,
And also uh, the um, the focus on intrinsic reinforcement,
Hmm.
which means the activity or the teacher, the clinician is the compelling is what's compelling, not the golden arches at the end.
mm,
So whether it's you uh, playing with a kid with, for example, a ball, They just love to throw balls, for example. Uh, in contrast to setting up some sort of routine where if you behave yourself, then during the break you can play with these objects, uh, where it's more like, well, here I am. I am not the taker or awayer of your favorite activity, but I'm the provider of your activity. And we're going to do these things together, and we're going to use this activity in which to teach whatever needs to be taught.
That's
Yes, yes, exactly. That's very well said. Yeah.
one of one of the things that I recall from the LCDC, uh, and I've been to Higashi, and it's a huge place, and for kids, and there's a lot of places to go to within the school, and at LCDC, it was like there was the teacher and the assistants. They take them from point to point. There was no, secondary teacher who's coming in and taking them away from the classroom. There's always like that connective between activities. And I think this was absolutely critical for some of the kids, just too much transition. And I was wondering about Higashi with all that space and that, huge gymnasium and all. How do they hold the program with all these kids who are going to be super sensitive to different input at each location, at each event? Was there a guiding principle for that?
That's a really good question, and that's a big challenge. There's a number of things that go into that from the daily life therapy method that assists the children. One is the visual schedule, which pretty much everybody uses. They're presented right away. At least they know that over time that there's a pattern to each day. We do this, we do this, we do this, and this. On the visual schedule is always the text and then a photograph or a simple drawing to like at least help prepare their mind that this environment may look like this or this activity is symbolized by this. So
Hmm.
preparing their mind through the visual schedule and presenting the routine, whether it's the daily routine, we're going to go to math and then we have physical education or art. But within those classes, there's always a highly structured routine. We're going to first do a warm-up activity, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. So those routines and patterns become comforting because we keep them constant, and then we slowly increase the challenge of the work in those activities. But I think one of the great things that I've learned from daily life therapy is using what we call our basic postures as coping mechanisms. And when I first got there, I was like, whoa, I thought it was a little bit like a military school because the teachers were telling the students, stand at attention,
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
ease, hold your hands back like a soldier, or
Right.
sit on the floor and hold your knees, and that's called make a pose. And immediately we teach these postures because we know that they're going to have stress going from environment to environment, situation to situation. So right away we want to teach them, life is going to be like that. What do you do? Do you run away? Do you engage in aberrant behaviors? Do you get your comfort toy? So you teach them that they're metabolically, when you sit in a posed position, it's almost like meditation. You literally get a grip of yourself. And
Right.
it can be a very comforting and calming a way to be. And so we teach those in a non-contingent way. We play, and that's what reminds me of Miller Method too, is when I used to teach basic postures to the little kids, they were just, bouncing all over the place. They could care less. So I would find out what they liked. So usually physical play, tickle, 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 tickle. Now you want to tickle again? Okay, stand at attention. Five, four, three, two, one. Tickle, 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 tickle. And
Yeah. Yeah.
build that up so that these basic postures were part of a play, part of fun. When I was an art teacher, I had a whole song like be a tree, be a rocket, that was the at ease, or be a basket was hold your knees. So
Oh,
being
wow.
an imaginative play, they would be a basket. And so when they would right away learn these postures, so yes, when we're going to lunch or lunch is over, or we're going down the hallway and some sensory thing happens, or something confusing happens and they start to have a meltdown or a panic attack, we immediately teach them, make a pose. It's okay, calm down. And so then they have this tool so that there's not a deeper progression into deregulation. So that's one of our tricks.
That is terrific. the idea that a schedule can be very comforting and, lay you back on track, and things are going to be in a predictable fashion. I see the poses as kind of an internal schedule in a way. Like if you get into a problem area, you can go back to a pose, and with some assistance, you might be able to calm down a little bit more. But if someone cues you, well, let's try to um, go to attention or at ease, and maybe that familiarity is going to help them de-stress from a situations that's deregulating them, you might say.
Yeah, and they're very, and one of the words, the terminologies we use, they're positive, direct, and observable.
Hmm.
Like there's something to do instead of don't do this, to do this instead. It's very direct. We know Billy do this, and then it's observable. You can feel yourself and see yourself doing it,
Yeah.
and then internally you feel it. You calm down. It metabolically makes you calm. Um, One of this, and then group education, I think, is one of the things that really helps the students as well. They're going along with the group, like. One, for instance, jogging, which we do a lot of at the Boston Nagashi School,
Hmm.
for all the benefits that we could get into. But a lot of the very few students come to the Nagashi School and say, "Hey, let's jog." There's I say there's usually three types. One that wants to bolt, one that it just doesn't have the physical ability to do it yet, and another that just flat out refuses.
Right.
So what we would do is teach the students to do fun. It's real to teach them it's really fun to stay in with your group in a line. And that would usually start with marching around the desks in the classroom to spirited music.
Hmm.
Da 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 da. And we'd march, 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 march. Or you would even make a hands on the shoulders, make a train to get very used to staying in line with your peers. And
Hmm.
that's very fun and low stakes. So then the prompt becomes stay in line, stay in line. We go out to the outside of the gym to jog, and we say, let's go jogging. Oh, that triggered that word jogging means I'm going to sweat, I'm going to be uncomfortable. But no, just stay in line. The line just happens to start moving more quickly, but
Aha.
you're just staying in line.
Yeah, it's a nice bridge to the more challenging skill.
Yeah. And so
I
that was a great way we used to help the students acclimate to that. And one of the stories I'm going to have a fun time telling in my really exciting trip to India with Stephen coming up is about the how the group can be so helpful with these type of non-compliant situations. My favorite story from this is one of the students that I was teaching as a substitute one day because the classroom teacher was away. This guy was he was a really fun student with the classroom teacher. He had a certain presentation, but when the classroom teacher wasn't there, and this is one of the other challenges, Stephen, when the teacher becomes the main driver of the relationship and the teacher is absent, oh boy, those sometimes so transferring that or expanding that pool of people that this children can be bonding with is
Right.
really important. And when I first had to help this one child, he just flat out refused everything. He just went on the floor, went on the floor, went on the floor. Other teachers tried to help him up, and it was just a long, sweaty day. So then that same day, I worked a shift at the residence, and they said, you're going to be assigned this particular group. And sure enough, this student was in the group. I was like, oh my goodness,
Here we go again.
a long day is going to go into a long night. And
Yeah.
so I started up, and I was in charge of a small group, and the student was part of that group. But then the smaller groups were part of a big group that was going to go do some activity, and there was someone in charge of that bigger group. So sure enough, we start going down this hallway, and he goes to the floor. But the leader of the large group looked at me and says, "No, step away. Don't go in there." And he prompted the entire group, instead of getting this one student to stand up and join us, he said, everybody lie down. So the
Oh,
whole 12 students lied on the ground. And we just said, and then he said, eventually, get up and make a pose and touch your shoulders, touch your head, and then everybody stand up. Sure enough, the guy stands right up, no
that's
problem.
that's great
And
technique.
I was like, oh wow. And then he told me, don't make eye contact and don't say his name because you'll break this little bubble we've created. So just use the prompt everybody, and
Hmm.
then role model what needs to be done. And then
That's a terrific classroom technique. That's
yeah,
That
y-
is.
Yeah, it it kind of reminded me. I was out in California observing a class that was Elaine Hall, her program out in California. She wasn't there, but one of her teachers was, and she was having the whole classroom do activity like jumping jacks and exercise. And one kid was having a bit of a meltdown and was, and rather than the teacher, pressing, the other kids were saying, like, they started slowly going, we can't continue until such and such. But they did it in a way like, I'm having trouble continuing because such and such is on the floor right now. But
Hmm.
it was so gradual that and the kids, it's almost like they had a sense of what the other kid needed. But this is probably a little more advanced class, but what you're describing is definitely a technique that others should know about because they would jump right into addressing the kid on the floor.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, it's
yeah.
very, and I was doing it that whole day.
Mm,
And then when I saw it being that effective, I was like, oh my gosh, this, and then when you see those type of interventions being effective as an educator, it, at least for myself and many of my colleagues, it starts to become fun
yeah.
to try to discover, what there's a lot of, I'm always fascinated with what those avenues to connection through, a little bit of what Stephen was saying, something more intrinsic or something more, I'm not quite sure the right terminology for it. It's not, it's a non-contingent intervention that honors the student's particular tendencies and helps them get into a pattern that's less resistive
Mm,
without creating a fight or flight type of trigger. It's very subtle, but it can be really, really. The beauty of all my experiences at Higashi, I've seen so many of those amazing moments, and I'm not even sure why they work. I can appeal to researchers to come and say why did that work, and how
yeah.
can we make that more prevalent and useful? It's interesting you mentioned the other students helping that student, which reminds me a bit of the Tokyo school, which Stephen and I had visited in the Musashi no Higashi Gaku, which is now the Kichijoji something or other, but that was a mixed education environment where Dr. Kitahara's original students were, most of them were typically developing, and they were the catalysts for helping the students, on the spectrum, yeah, make friends and be part of the activities, which I was very
Amazing.
beautiful to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a
Um,
question,
Go
and
ahead.
that is, so often when we think about supporting autistic individuals, we think about the need for predictability and regularity,
Mm.
and making sure you've got your schedules down and the student knows exactly what's going to happen next. And that worked great in both LCDC, and it worked great in
Bagashi.
Boston Higashi as well,
Mm,
and many other situations. However, the world is not always predictable. The parent driving their child home who may have significant challenges and we may not even developed a reliable means of communication with them yet, but suddenly there's a detour and the parent has to go a different way home.
Hmm.
You get a big old meltdown in the back seat.
right.
And so uh, one thing the Miller method is known for is preparing the individual for disorder. So how does that get done in daily life therapy?
That is such a great question, and that's exactly what happens. You have the best laid plans, and then life,
Mhm.
it shows up, and there it
Right.
goes. What I've seen, the most experienced or successful teachers do, they create a route, they have the routines around the building, but then they throw in predictable and unpredictability,
Mm.
purposeful novelty. So we always walk down the hall to the art room this way. Today we're going to do it the other way
Oh, wow.
on purpose. And of
Yeah.
course, the students start to show some deregulation, and you teach the students that in any place you go, like the basic postures, particularly the Queen Mother, make a pose, is portable. You can make a pose pretty much anywhere, even
Hmm.
in the backseat of a car. And
Hmm.
so if you are taught ahead of time, through a social story, when I feel distress, my ears get hot or this something that happens, I then make a pose. So you rehearse this over and over. I had a child who this guy was so funny. He would go home on the weekends and the best laid plans, even though they had a schedule, they had a routine, he was just a prankster. He just he had the whatever it was, he liked to do the opposite. And he would always cause difficulties. So I asked my supervisor at that time, what should I do with X when he goes home? I'm not there. She said, what you should do is practice with him 50 times a day and just sit down and make a pose. And make it fun. Don't make it a demanding command. Just, hey, let's sit down, make a pose. Three, two, one. Good job. Stand up again. Hey, make a pose. Three, two, one. And just do that over and over again so that the parents could use that same. He was so used to it, it didn't matter that I was saying it. Anyone could say make a pose and he would just do it. And so then he went home, and sure enough, he started to do that when he deregulated. Um, so giving them that thing to do so that the tantrum or the panic attack doesn't become, dangerous or overwhelming, but at the same time putting in some purposeful mistakes. And those mistakes also are great opportunities to elicit communication. I would purposely put my schedule the wrong way, and they knew Wednesday we have this, and I would do it the opposite way, just so they could say they'd start showing what are you
Discomfort.
seeing? Press the
Yeah.
button, use the symbol. I have something's different. I gotta communicate to you that versus something's different. I need to have a meltdown. No, here's an out. I have control. Hey, why aren't we going the way we usually go? Or what's going on here? And sometimes that communication is a great de-stressor as well. Yeah. And communicating to the child ahead of time, we're there's been a change. Art is canceled today, and when we get to art, we're going to do this instead and prepare their mind several times before it happens. Is another way to get them used to the fact that sometimes things change. Stephen's
Yeah.
example, again, can't always be mitigated because those sudden changes are
Right.
are so difficult. So my advice is always give this child a very good coping mechanism so that they can ride it out. But at the same time, introduce novelty throughout your day to help them either have a coping mechanism or a way to communicate their distress or
You
that
know,
they're different.
interestingly enough, this brought back some memories about, cancellations and either purposeful or not, but and the teacher's use of intonation uh, to build a little bit of like predictability. Like it would go something like this: child showing some discomfort over the fact they're not going to the usual place, and the teacher very appropriately is sitting them down for moments. No art today, no art, and maybe say no, no, just and walk. We're not going to art today, and it would take them through it a few times. But I was surprised at the how the use of intonation and um, much as the way they like with climbing on the boards, they go up, climbing on a structure, go up or go down. They would say no art in a very kind of like neutral or um, comforting type of tone, and and just build that no art today, but we are gonna go to gym instead. Going to gym instead, sort of like building a bridge with their voice to the next activity. Um, so this is something I saw a lot of use of intonation, and especially when they had an event or a disruption, and that was the tool. So.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I think our teachers utilize that as well.
Hmm.
And also trying to get them to focus on something immediate in the situation they're in when they're feeling so overwhelmed about, a bigger change.
Hmm.
So that there's a smaller routine that they can fall into. Sometimes it's playful. Sometimes it's head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and you just sing that song
Right.
20 times and they forget the thing they were distressed about. Another technique that I thought was always very helpful in these situations was what we utilize is clear beginnings and endings. So when a class begins, like they might say, let's begin math, the children will literally raise their hand and say, yes. It's almost like you're cheering, yes, math. Oh, well, yes, math. And then when math is over, they would say, thank you. I mean, in Japan, they would bow. But
Right, right.
it's all, and there's a lot of intonation with that too. Let's begin. Yes, it's over. Thank you. And
Yeah.
so when that was part of the constant, daily life, hearing beginnings and endings, that became something they could memorize. So like, for instance, if, a student got, we had an ice cream cone and they wanted three more, getting into that discussion whether, everybody only gets one or we're all finished. And that
Right.
sometimes doesn't work. Sometimes you just say, eating ice cream is over. Thank you. And they've memorized that over means over.
Over means over, sure.
Yeah. So
It's
that's a lot of the three P's: to predict, proact, prevent. Predict that these things are going to happen. Drill even when they're not happening. And so then eventually when they do happen,
that's great.
that.
I like that. I like that putting putting a period on the class that they can all remember. It's not just the end of this class. That's how all the classes are going to finish up, and it must have been effective. It must have been effective, and
Many
that's what.
times it was effective. Another time it was effective too. And it's really important to communicate with parents and all caregivers and stakeholders, because you may do something that's a little abrupt or unique, and if everyone doesn't understand it, they can be confused as well. One of the ways we used to use that one a lot is students, it was a residential school, most of the students, it's many day students as well, but being home all weekend long, doing fun things or spending too much time with the Golden Arches or whatever might happen, coming back to school on Monday morning was not always, none of us are happy usually on a Monday morning to
Right.
re-engage and challenge. So they'd get out of the car and, mommy, we'll see you Friday, and I love you, and bye-bye, and all that would never, that would always usually, pour fuel on the fire. A teacher would come out and say, see, mommy is over. Thank you. Boom, they'd walk right in. And those memorized closures were very effective. Sometimes the parents would be a little bit of like, that was abrupt. How come
Yeah,
we didn't have a good goodbye kiss? And we said, I'll call you later. I'll tell you why,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then let them know. But that I found was extremely, especially one of my tendencies was to always play with the kids and fool around, and then they loved it, so they didn't want to finish. And so getting them to go back to their classroom when I was a director was always, I said, play with John, it's over. Thank you. And they could go back. But it's also important that those closures only work most effectively when they've been coupled with an entry.
Mm.
So if instead of just randomly picking up a kid to play, I would say, let's begin
Let's
playing.
play. Yeah, let's
Yes.
play.
So
Yeah.
then when I put in the bookend, it was okay.
Did
Yeah.
you have success with the parents taking those type of approaches too, or was that like foreign language to them?
That was the biggest challenge of the
Yeah,
entire time I was there.
yeah,
I
yeah.
used to, I did a lot as a director there. We did home visits with the students as much as possible. Um, at least twice a year, we, follow the bus home and see how their routines are at home, and try to transition some of the daily life therapy stuff to home. And that was very difficult. And one day it dawned on me, I was like, if this particular parent came to the school and applied for a job, I would probably not hire them. So why am
Right.
I expecting them to deliver this type of education in the way the teachers do? That's an unrealistic expectation. Let's try to get into where they're at and come up with
Yeah.
some sort of system that can bring a little of both worlds. One of the most effective ones was if a kid had a horrible routine at home, like here's the classic: come home from school, put your pajamas on, turn on the TV, and start eating cheese balls. And it's 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And so then how you break that? Well, say, no, Billy, you're not going to do that. You can do your homework. Then, oh, good luck.
Yeah.
So
You
that was
lost them.
what
You
we would
lost them.
do. Yeah, we lost him, and then he would lose it. But then we would do is we would put we would introduce a schedule and a routine by making it the routine they already have. Instead of changing it, we would say, your routine, we want you to put your pajamas on. We want you to eat cheese balls. We're on the same page here. So day after day, they come home, they see the schedule. put on your pajamas, eat cheese balls, put on Scooby-Doo.
Hmm.
Then that might go on for a week. Then the next week would say, come home from school, just put your pajama shirt on, but leave your pants on, eat cheese balls, and watch Scooby-Doo.
Right.
And then introduce those changes incrementally within the existing dysfunctional schedule.
Gotcha.
And then they would
It's
accept it more and more. Yeah.
Yeah, gradual change.
Yeah.
Stephen, you have a lot of insight on the necessity of support in the home, what's going on in the classroom. Care to comment?
Yeah, I mean,
What
that
John's
is
talking?
why it's so important. And I've seen this both at LCDC and at Boston Higashi, is the parental education,
Yeah,
bringing the parents in and explaining this is why things are the way they are. And as John so mentioned, the goodbye may seem abrupt, but there's a reason for it.
sure.
And explaining that, and then generalizing to the home. A lot of challenges occur when there is a lack of generalization between home and
Mm.
school. And
That's so true.
That's really wonderful what you said, Steve, because some of the cases we bring the parents into the classroom at school
Mhm.
and
Right.
begin that process versus we go into we go on the parents' turf, we're way at a disadvantage. But
Right.
if we bring the parents into our turf, then the student starts saying, hey, well, Bum's part of this group. What's going on here? And sometimes it was just have the parents stay in the classroom and don't do anything
Yeah.
Right.
and just get used to this child gets used to like not making a demand of that parent, where usually the parent is very important in some of these children's lives because the parent has a purse and in the purse is the candy. And then
Right.
so you're going to come in the classroom and you're going to sit there in a chair and we're not going to have the purse or the candy. So your child is going to start to associate you in a different way.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
it's
That may take a whole
possible,
year. Yeah.
and thinking about it, it's possible that the lack of generalization between school and home may stem from experiences in typical public schools.
Mm,
Because what often happens is, I've seen happen a number of times at least, is the teacher will describe the child, then the parent will describe the child. Are you sure we're talking about the same
this thing-
mm.
right, right.
And in
Yeah.
school, the child is
So
behaving like the proverbial angel, and they're doing their utmost just to keep it all together. Home is a safe place, and then they just let it all out
hmm,
and have meltdowns, somewhat akin to um, an employee has a bad day at work, the boss yells at them something or other, and then they come home and
right.
yell at their spouse and kick the dog. Uh, and the
And there's
fortunate,
no favorite teacher at home to help solve this problem for parents, is there? So
no, but
yeah,
at LCDC and at Boston Higashi, uh, there's much greater awareness.
Mm,
And
mm, mm,
you look for those signs of stress and how to help that child handle that stress and work with it and monitor it and do something about it. And for example, making a pose, as you said, and getting all that deep pressure and proprioception
yeah.
process.
one of my most clear memories working at LCDC was the parents that were really involved almost became like paraprofessionals,
Mm,
and they and for instance, like working at the boards, they became so adept working at the elevated structures that you'd almost think they were like an assistant teacher or something. But what they bought into the program, and they were learning techniques that they knew they could take home with them. They developed that type of confidence. But John, just as you said, if you get the parents, bring them into your world, so that they are educated in the program. It's very similar to what went on at LCDC, and part of the LCDC mindset was, if you're not having that parental understanding, it's not going to stick. It's not going to, what goes on in the classroom is not going to bridge to the home. And I just remember, parents, and this would continuing into the video conferencing. It's similar to the Zoom. Then it was video conferencing, but you'd have the parents calling in and taking, or a teacher calling in, and they do a Zoom session with my father about, or a VCO session, and reinforce those skills. But it's like they're off site. They're not at the LCDC. So it was very, and I think for the parents, it was very rewarding because, as for everyone, learning something, that you grasp the reason is very satisfying. It's like, I understand why the kid's melting down, or um, and that de-stresses the parent a little bit as well. So just really fundamentally sound, what you're describing. Really, really great stuff.
And it's very important to coach the parents so delicately because we would often have them come in and do activity like come and eat lunch with us, or the residential teachers would like to go grocery shopping with us. So there was a established routine that they knew that we do with them, that that's something that's part of the home environment. They might
Right.
not, do, painting or drill math facts at home as much as you're going to eat and go grocery shopping. And we coach the parents, if you go grocery shopping and it went well, that's victory. The
Yeah.
rest of the day goes to it doesn't work. Don't, oh well. You got this one victory, wonderful. And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. We've been talking about separation, the need for like even abrupt separation from parents, and at the same time, we need parents' involvement and understanding of what the goals are in the programming, and and how that benefits, the kid.
Hmm.
Because separation is an important thing for a kid to learn. It's okay, mom and dad are going to be outside of the room, even if that's the trigger. They'll be, it's that's going to be okay. At the same time, well, today in our usually we have a classroom activity. Usually it's just us, but today the parents gonna come in and take part in this activity, and that could be overstimulating. But these are the steps that are effective and also very beneficial to go through. I think it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. Oh, this is all very rich stuff. This is a
Yeah.
conversation. Um,
So we're pushing up against the end of the hour.
yes.
Stephen, any thoughts?
One thing that comes to mind is here we're talking about comparing between Miller method and daily life therapy, and I'm seeing a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
So really, what we're talking about, I think, is just plain old good education. In
Mm,
this case, it's good education for autistic individuals.
Right.
And I also believe that we can take this type of good education, the philosophies that are used, and generalize them to general education. That
very.
is that is what we saw at the Musashi no Higashi when it
Hmm.
existed. And I believe that that's those principles that you can use, even I use them as I teach my college students. Those principles are just good education.
Right, right.
Yeah. At another time, I would be really interested to hear about John's take, and Stephen, you and I have done it before, but on individual planning for a new client, a new student, and individual, what you're interviewing, or part of that one-on-one process. That would be just to compare and contrast more Miller method in daily life. with Hagashi. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that. This may just be the beginning of some more fruitful talks. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Right.
might be. And I think that these types of conversations are important because so often we see people who get involved in various approaches and then they just trash all the other approaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Tunnel,
exactly.
tunnel vision. Yeah.
Yeah,
Tunnel vision.
but
Yeah.
there's really much more gained, and it's great to see this happening in the Boston Higashi School. I remember haranguing Rosemary and then later Deb, uh, Bob Fantasia as well. And we need to look at many different approaches.
Right.
And then what are some strategies? Recognizing that some strategies are the same between the two. They might be given different names. They might even be given different theories as to why they work, but they do work. And
Mm.
then there's so much to learn from each other.
Yeah. And
So true, so true.
it's so bad. Some of the kids can be so problematic. You really shouldn't discount other techniques, when you run out of your playbook. It's not, there's always something to learn. And if it works for the individual, that's pretty good indicator that, hey, there might be something to this other
Right.
technique or this other methodology. You can't discount it. And so, food for thought, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Student-centered thinking. What works for the student versus what the adults want to impose.
Right.
Yeah,
We exist for the students.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
exactly, exactly.
John Kolwaite, thank you so much for joining us. LCDC presents. Stephen, thank you again.
Oh,
And
my pleasure.
all right,
Yes, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
all right, you're quite welcome. And we'll do it again soon.